What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down some of the worst bad habits that quarterbacks can fall into, and we're going to compare and contrast that with some of the best throwing motions in the NFL and how you guys can avoid these habits. So I hope this video helps you guys out. I hope it could teach you a few new things, but also, fellas, if you are a quarterback and you want to get better at reading defenses, want to know what to look for in coverages, check out that very first link in the description below where you can get access to 500 plus videos just like this one where we break down defensive coverages, best plays to work them, and what to look for to identify. We break down every single video into categories because 500 videos is a lot, but we organize it so it's easy for you guys to access the info and retain the info. So check out that very first link in the description below if you want to improve your football IQ as a quarterback. Let's get started with this video. So we're going to be talking about, again, some of the worst habits that quarterbacks get into and some of the most common bad habits that quarterbacks get into that limit their velocity, that cause a lot of arm pain, and honestly make you a less consistent quarterback. So the first one is going to be pushing off of your back leg to create a front stride. So I'm going to play this clipper from this quarterback, and this ball, it's not a terrible throw, but the ball dies out. You see how that ball doesn't really finish with some energy? It kind of starts out good and then starts to die down towards the very tail end of this throw. And all that has to do with this quarterback's inability, because of his throwing mechanics, to generate torque. I'm not saying he won't ever be able to generate torque, and he actually will if he fixes these simple things. And I know all of you have this problem. So one of the old school methods that a lot of quarterback coaches used to teach was, okay, you want to be in a base and you want to try to push off of the inside arch of your back foot and you want to push at the target to be able to generate power off of your back leg. Now that is probably one of the most false statements when it comes to throwing the football in terms of generating power, because it throws off something called your throwing sequence. So every single quarterback has a throwing sequence. Your throwing sequence is broken down into 4 parts. The first part is going to be the base. You guys want to try to have maybe about 60 to 70% of your weight loaded onto your back leg, and we're going to show some examples of quarterbacks who don't do that and the problems it causes with their throwing motion in a second here. But that's the first part of the base, 60 to 70% loaded on the back leg and nice and light on the front foot. Now, some of you might be thinking you want to have 60 to 70% weight back here so you can transfer that weight to the front side. That's where your power comes from. Incorrect. That is part of it, but that's not the only reason that you want to have weight on your back leg. You want to have weight on your back leg so the second part of your throwing sequence, which is the front stride, can time up properly with your upper body, like stroke, if you will, or like just like motion. That's what they call it, the stroke, the backstroke, if you will. So you want to have a good base, and you want to make sure that you are taking a short stride with your front foot. When your front foot makes contact with the ground, and we're going to be showing Aaron Rodgers here in a second with a perfect throwing sequence that you guys should all try to emulate. Nobody wants to throw like another quarterback. We're not trying to get the exact same motion as Rodgers, because I think, honestly, that's a little unrealistic. That's unrealistic for anybody to try to throw exactly similar to somebody else. Everybody's got their own motion, but the throwing sequence is what you should try to replicate, because all great quarterbacks have a great throwing sequence, and we're going to go over that. So you see, the second part of the throwing sequence is the front stride. We need the front foot to get into the ground fast. We don't want to overstride. We don't want to wide stride. We want it in the grass right now. So when that front foot gets down, you still maintain some weight on the back leg so your shoulders can rotate back. That is the next part of the throwing sequence. You want to make sure that your shoulders stay loaded as the front foot gets down. So then when you have that front foot down, that's when it's time to transfer your weight off the back leg. That's when it's time to drive through, when you've already taken a front stride. And then the last part of the throwing sequence is the shoulders and the football coming through. Guys, it is very, very similar when it comes to generating power as a quarterback as a baseball like hitter. Hitting a baseball is the exact same power production, exact same torque as throwing a football. When that pitcher throws you a ball, you step at the pitcher with your front foot, but do you bring the bat through at the same time? No, because you're not pushing off the back foot to create the stride. You're stepping at the pitcher, staying loaded on the back leg, and keeping the baseball bat back here. So those hips, that pivot of the back foot, can bring the bat through. So one of the mistakes quarterbacks will make is they'll get to this base, but guys, when you push off of your back foot and you push your weight forward to create the front stride, you see how all of his body weight all of a sudden shifts to the front side of his frame. Guys, when you have all of your body weight onto your front side of your frame, you cannot close your shoulders as the foot strike happens. It's physically impossible. All your weight is essentially already transferred. You have no weight loaded onto the back leg. So what ends up happening is, yeah, your front stride comes down, but your shoulders are coming through the same time the front foot gets down. So that fourth part of the throwing sequence, aka your shoulders, beat the hips in the motion. So you see how when this quarterback goes through, he takes a step, but because he's pushing forward, look at his shoulder and look at his elbow. Your shoulder and your elbow should never get to this position where it's ahead of your back hip, but that is because he pushed to create the front stride. Those hips are off sequence. Everybody knows that quarterbacks need to rotate from their hips, but it's about the timing of the hip rotation. Do the hips go through before the shoulders do? That is what we want to try to shoot for. So guys, what you want to think about is you want to get to this exact base that this quarterback has. He has a perfect base. He's not too wide. His back knee isn't caved in. But guys, you want to step separately from the back leg drive. It's like hitting a baseball. You step with the front foot and the shoulders should stay back. If he was able to get that front foot in the ground right then and there and stay here with his shoulders, that hip would be able to go through. But because this pushed through, that push to create the stride, it is impossible to keep that weight back and get those hips to rotate through. So that's the first common problem. Guys, it is not a push off the back foot. It is a step with the front foot, maintain your weight. As you maintain your weight, load the football back, then let's let the hips rip through. Let's rip open with your front hip to bring the football through. You never want to push and you never want to be linear as a QB. So I'm going to play this full speed one more time and you guys can see how the ball kind of dies off towards the tail end. And then we're going to compare this to Aaron Rodgers' throw. So now, Aaron Rodgers, arguably the best throwing sequence in the NFL. I'm not even going to be talking about his arm. I'm not even going to be talking about the quick release, how he throws the ball, because I don't think any quarterback in America could emulate that type of arm slot, that type of arm motion. I don't think anybody can. But what you can emulate is the timing of his throwing sequence. You look at him throw the ball, Tom Brady, Josh Allen, anybody that's anybody in the quarterback space. They all have the right timing with their throwing sequence. That is the most important thing. It is not about how one throws the ball. There is not a single quarterback out there that any of you should try to throw exactly like. You should try to emulate how they produce velocity and how they get sustainable arm strength. So let's watch what Aaron Rodgers does here with this sequence. I'm going to play it full speed and then I'll break it down slow-mo. So again, when he throws, the timing of everything is on point. He's throwing a rope downfield. Ball finishes with energy. Ball is right on target. How is he able to do this so consistently and make it look so easy? And it is because of his throwing sequence. So you see when he goes to throw, first part, where's his base? This is the exact same base as the last quarterback had, right? About 60% loaded on his back leg. He's nice and light on his front foot. But let's take a look at the timing here, right? His back foot is down, and watch what happens. His front foot hits the grass. But you see how that ball in his front shoulder is still loaded back. Front foot is making contact. He keeps weight onto his back foot. He is not pushing off the back foot to create the front stride. The stride is a separate event from the back leg drive and from the weight transfer from back leg to front foot. And again, this is not like your typical like opposite L, ball goes back in the L type of motion. Everybody has their own motion. You should never try to replicate this from a quarterback. Everybody has the same type of motion. The timing of the motion, the timing of the hip rotation is what you should be trying to replicate. So again, weight stays back, his front foot gets down. Weight is still loaded, so his front foot is grounded, so now that's when it's time to transfer through. And you see how he's shifting the weight through, his back hip is driving through, his front hip is opening up, and I want you to look at this angle. You see how his elbow and his shoulder are behind the back hip. If your football is chasing your hip, aka the hip is coming through first, we are on sequence. But you look at the last quarterback example, because he pushed to create the front stride. Look where the football is. The football is coming through before the back hip. That is where we lose velocity and torque, and that puts a ton of pressure on the arm. There's a reason why these NFL guys, fellas, are able to throw so many throws for such long periods of time, because they have the right sequence. They're throwing the ball with their legs and their hips, but it's not just about the legs and the hips. It's about the timing of the legs and the hips. So now, let's go over another mistake that quarterbacks make that will cause them to have that same problem. Because now, again, that first quarterback, he had a great base, right? He had 60% of the weight on his back leg. He just took that weight and pushed it all forward, which is honestly just, then you end up with bad weight distribution. Your front foot's getting down, but when your front foot's down, if all your body weight is onto your front side, so if you're a righty, that would be your left side, you have no shoulder rotation, your hips aren't going to be able to rotate, and the shoulder and elbow will beat your your hips in the throwing motion. So let's look at another cause of this bad habit. This is a quarterback throwing a 10-yard speed out. So a 10-yard speed out is known as like a rhythm 3 drop back, right? So you step with the right foot, cross over with the left, plant on your right foot, and then drive. You're not hitching. It's not a shuffle drop. It's just a 3 and throw. So many quarterbacks struggle with this because the second step in their drop, their crossover step, is insanely heavy, and their weight is too far forward when they plant off the third step of throw, which causes a flawed throwing motion. So let's talk about it. And it all has to do with the timing, fellas. So he goes back 1, 2, 3. You see how much his weight is forward. You see how his front foot rips open, ending up behind. He kind of over rotates with his shoulder, and all that has to do with his base. Guys, 99% of all quarterback problems are probably with the feet and the weight distribution and obviously the timing. And that's what I'm trying to get across to you guys today. So when he plants on this third step, again, one, crossover step is insanely heavy. His heel is hitting the ground. So you see when his third step hits, where is most of his body weight? Forward. This back knee is caved in. His back foot is wide outside of his frame. So why is this bad? Because there's not as much weight on the back leg to transfer to the front leg. But also, what can't he do with his shoulders when all of his weight is on the left side of his body? He can't rotate them back on the foot strike. Therefore, the timing of his hip rotation is either going to be late or it's just not going to happen at all. And the shoulders will beat the hips in the motion. So you see when he goes to throw, again, he takes a short stride, but watch what happens. Remember, the first part of the sequence is the base. If the base is flawed, then the second part of the sequence is also going to be flawed. And the third and the fourth. It starts with the base. So when he takes that front stride and all his weight is forward, you see how, again, there's no close of the shoulder. There's no rotation back. There's no weight back. When the front foot hits, his front side is already coming open because, again, there's no weight on the back leg for him to stay back. So the front foot hits, but again, there's no hip rotation. Elbow and shoulder and football are all ahead of the back hip. Very similar to the first example, just two different problems, but the end result is the exact same. And if you watch this ball full speed, this speed out, this 10-yard out is supposed to finish with some velocity. Watch how this ball kind of dies off at the tail end of it. Kind of dies off, finishes on this wide receiver's like back hip. As you can see, I'll play it in slow motion. You see how that's finishing on his back hip. That ball should be finishing with energy high into the outside if we're throwing this, not maybe high, but to the outside with some velocity. It can't die off. Guys, everything you see on social media is not necessarily, oh, well, that's how it should look. That's going to be a good ball every time. It's way different in person. It's way different when you start seeing these things. That's why he doesn't have the velocity on this ball like he should have, because he just doesn't have his weight back enough. So if I was coaching up this quarterback, I would tell him that when he plants on his third step or his crossover step, he should try to keep his heel off the ground. He should be very light with the crossover step. Third step should be heavy. His knees shouldn't be caved in. His back foot should be underneath his hip. His weight should be shifted back like 70%. This is the problem with those 50-50 base guys, the guys who teach you want to be 50-50 base. I know everybody's probably heard Joe Burrow talk about how he's a 50-50 base guy. Again, I'm not saying that that's wrong, but this is the problem with a lot of guys that teach this, that their quarterbacks fall into these habits. Too much weight is forward. They're not able to get their hips involved. And guys, when you take a front stride, when your front stride makes contact and your shoulder is ripping open same time, mechanically you are going to be flawed. Elbow in football are ahead of hips. That is pressure on the elbow. That is injuries with the elbow. And that is less velocity on the ball. It's like hitting a baseball, fellas. You get your weight loaded back in the batter's box. When you take a step to the pitcher, your weight needs to stay back. You don't stand in the batter's box with all your weight on your front side. You have it loaded on the back leg so we could have the timing of the motion. So let's play this again full speed, fellas. Just make sure that we avoid these two habits. We don't want to have my base weight distribution flawed pre-throw, and I don't want to push to create the front stride, which also flaws the weight distribution. All right, fellas, I really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. Always appreciate the feedback. It's always great to hear from you guys. And again, fellas, if you would like 500 plus videos on how quarterbacks can read defenses and diagnose coverages, check out that very first link in the description below. We'd love to get you on that. Over 500 plus videos, like we said, to improve your football IQ. Very first link in the description. I'll see you guys next time.